Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first book club of 2026. I could not be more excited. A, we got some snow here in Columbia Falls today. Whoop, whoop. And B, we are joined tonight by John Taliaferro, who is joining us tonight from Austin, Texas, to talk about his book about really the seminal biography of George Bird Grinnell. John, as you know, is an esteemed biographer and historian, splits his time between Texas and Montana, and has written really books about really very, very interesting characters, including Montana's own Charlie Russell. And, it's really neat to be able to be in community with somebody who has this breadth of experience writing about some of the great characters of the West and American history. So, John Taliaferro, thank you very much for joining us.
I'm honored to be with you. It's happy to talk about Grinnell, and I feel like I'm a little closer to Glacier just by being with the group tonight.
Well, and we're also joined tonight, and thank you for that. We're glad to be close to you. We're even closer because one of George Bird Grinnell's descendants, a very dear friend to the Conservancy, Hugh Grinnell, is also with us. Those of you who go back to the beginning with me will remember that our second book in July of 2020 was The Father of Glacier National Park: Discoveries, Explorations, in his own words, by Hugh Grinnell, using the records of George Bird Grinnell's events. So, Hugh, thanks for joining us tonight. It's very special to have you with us. In fact, pardon my phone ringing. That's actually Hugh Grinnell. Um, that's kind of funny. So, in any case, John, I want to start with kind of give us what's the story of how you got to be a writer, historian, biographer. You started somewhere, you went to Harvard, you've written all these great books. Kind of give us the arc of history here.
Well, I am not a trained academic historian. My background is in journalism, and I came to Montana for the first time in the early 1970s because my Harvard roommate was from Montana. And like so many people, I was, I was taken with the romance of the American West, and I was trying to figure out what that gravitational pull was, other than the glorious scenery. And I thought that my entree would one of the best ways to do it was to write a biography of Montana's patron saint, Charles M. Russell. And that was a way to just really wiggle in and sort out all the myth and the realities of why the cowboy and why the American West have become such a permanent part of our culture. So that was my first book back in the early 90s. But when I had to come up to Glacier, well, and visited Russell's cabin that he had at the end of his life on Lake McDonald, Bullhead Lodge. And and along the way, I realized that through his illustrated letters, he had many friendships, and one of them was a guy named Grinnell. So that was sort of a little piece filed away. And then as I went on, learning my way around Montana and learning my way around Russell, Grinnell just keeps popping up. I wrote a book called Great White Fathers, which is about Mount Rushmore, the idea that if you took Mount Rushmore as an artifact like the pyramids and say, what was the civilization that created it? Why wait 5,000 years? Let's do it now. And of course, and then I realized there was a guy named Grinnell who was there in 1874, and he just kept, he was like an old penny. He just kept showing up, showing up. So finally, after writing several more books, I circled back and I realized, well, there was no really bedrock biography of him, and there should be. So by that time, I had established my place in Montana. I'd been living here for almost 30 years, and um, carefully you don't start something you can't finish. And then I realized that with Grinnell, to get to him, the reason why there hadn't been a book about him, because no one could get their arms all the way around him. I don't know. George Bird Grinnell, you and I have 24 hours in our day. He must have had 48 because what he accomplished in his lifetime was extraordinary. And what he left behind was 40,000 pages of letters that no one really had ever been able to sort out until I was foolish enough to come along. So that was the beginning of my Grinnell quest. And I'm sure glad I did it. And it's interesting just to talk to you right now because it's been a few years since the book was out. And I must say that I'm not, and I'm glad that this is an open book test because, I've lost some of the chronology in my head and some of the itty bitty details. But Grinnell still speaks to me loud and clear. And I think he's a permanent and a vital piece of Montana history and certainly Glacier's history. So it's interesting and I'm grateful to have this opportunity to do this because it sort of, it stirs up my old Grinnell romance, and I'm glad to talk about him.
Well, we're super glad to have you. For those who are joining a little late, John Taliaferro, the author of the seminal biography on Grinnell, and I have sent Hugh the link, so hopefully Hugh Grinnell has been able to join us by now. Maybe some of you are new to the Glacier Book Club. Welcome. We have the greatest team in the business. Amy Lucky and Sydney and Andrew and Gracie are all working together tonight. We have a giveaway. We're going to ask John to sign some book plates. I've got a speed round, which we always have here at the Glacier Book Club. And we'll do questions in the chat. And in a couple of minutes, I'll hand it off to Amy. So please put questions in the chat. She may ask you to unmute yourself and ask your question. Don't be shy. And we'll also keep this right to the 1 hour that we've asked you to allocate tonight. So thank you for that. John, I want to go back a little bit to great story about selecting Grinnell from your college roommate. College roommates are really incredible in terms of how they change our lives, right? And that clearly was important to you. But you've also written about other kind of complicated subjects. Hay, burros. You mentioned the story about South Dakota. How do you choose your subjects, and do you lean to complicated characters?
Well, first of all, quick aside to Hugh Grinnell. Hi, Hugh. I met Hugh because he was so gracious and generous to provide entree into a Grinnell family reunion. The Grinnells go all the way back to Plymouth Colony. Some of the very first Americans, and I met Hugh and his wife Jackie there, and they really helped open some doors and gave me a feeling that the Grinnell family was interested in what I was doing. So, but back to your question, people say, "Why do you have a book about Charlie Russell? You have a book about Mount Rushmore. You have a biography of the creator of Tarzan, Edgar Rice Burroughs. You wrote a biography of John Hay, who was Lincoln's personal secretary and went all the way forward to being Teddy Roosevelt's Secretary of State. Well, all of these characters lived in the late 19th, early 20th century, and their lives they were witnesses to and factors in this great change that was going on in America from rural to urban and, small business to corporate uh, from small town to polyglot population, the loss of wilderness, all of that, and the emergence of the U.S. into a global entity. So is some common ground, and there's fewer than 6 degrees of separation, and all those people, you'd be surprised. But from a practical level, if you're an author, it's business, and there's a lot of everybody's been kind of taken. You're looking for open water to sail in, and of course, then you're looking for an idea that you can uh, sell to a publisher, and the publisher that can then sell to the public. And it's also a bit like a marriage. You don't want to, you're going to go off with somebody for 5 or 6 years, and you want to get along with them, and so you want to choose your mate fairly carefully.
You mentioned, John, you mentioned the time period in which a lot of your main protagonists of your biographies appear. It strikes me that as we read, and as many of us read in today's world about Grinnell's first big adventure, being in 1870, that it doesn't seem like that big a deal today when we can travel by plane, train, and automobile. Um, Talk to us about what did the world look like that was different as you've peeled back the onion on some of these characters, like Burroughs, like Hay, like Russell. Well, their world had to be just dramatically different than ours is. And how did that strike you?
Well, let's stick to Grinnell just for example. I mean, he was a city boy. He was a privileged kid, grew up in Manhattan, and in the years he was born in the years of the Civil War, and he had lived on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and seen the passenger pigeons flying by his house, and seeing all the changes of the city growing towards his residence in what was called Audubon Park. And the world was a much simpler place. He was sent off to Yale, um, and really just had a pretty good time, not a very good student. And when he graduated, didn't want to really go to work for his father's brokerage house in New York. And he had a professor named Othniel Marsh, who was one of the first preeminent uh, paleontologists. And this is sort of a perfect storm there, because when Grinnell graduated in 1870, the Transcontinental Railroad, the railroad had just been completed in 1869. Um, Darwin's Origin of the Species had been published 10 years before and was just being absorbed by academics and scientists, including Othniel Marsh. And so Grinnell signed on with his professor and a dozen of his other students to get on this train that had just been completed across the country. And they went out across the country and got off into the middle of the of Indian territory in um, the middle of Kansas, Nebraska, and all after reading all these storybooks when he was little about the American West, suddenly you could get there in a couple of days, and they set out gathering bones. Because Marsh was understood finally the origins of the species, and there are the Great American Plains, which had been a seabed. They were just getting off the train and filling up freight cars full of dinosaur bones, and it was just a crash course in the history of the West. Um, and while they're doing that, it was just Grinnell got this inkling that yes, there had been a lost era in the dinosaurs, but he also realized that there was another civilization that was quickly becoming extinct, and that was the Wild West, the buffalo country, and the home ground of Native Americans, and that idea of evanescence, of quickly changing civilization, was really imprinted on him then.
And and you write about this in the book. He was surrounded also by a cast of characters, also mostly from the East, who had a similar desire about the West and open spaces. So Pinchot and Muir and Roosevelt. So was that as we opened the West? and Grinnell made his way to the West. Is is that kind of a golden era of discovery about the West and open spaces?
Well, it's interesting. He could actually commute to the American West, to the West that was not quite tamed. He'd go back to New York and do his job. He'd started a publication called Forest and Stream, the first um, publication that was really for a hook and bullet magazine. Once he took it over, it became a voice for conservation. So yeah, he could keep one pivot foot in New York with all the connections and all the audience of people who are interested in that, and then for a couple months every year he would go west. He chased one of the last. He was on one of the last buffalo hunts with the Pawnees. He met Buffalo Bill. He went into the Black Hills with Custer in 1874 and turned down a chance to go with Custer again in 1976.
Good
Um,
choice.
thank goodness. So um, back to your question. Yeah, this was a really interesting time. But so what was going on in the East? You know, and people listening to this know what was changing in Montana in the 1870s. But what was, meanwhile, going on in New York, there was something called good government. People were realizing that with the immigration in New York and the building up of all the urban problems that's going on, including slums and poverty and the corruption of the Tweed Ring and graft and all that. There was this idea amongst the sort of the gentleman upper class that Grinnell would always be part of, that reform was possible and it was necessary because the American America was galloping out of control. And so there were various do-good organizations to reform government, to help out the poor, to create better social services. So when Grinnell, as the years went by and he started spending time with Native Americans, he spent time realizing that the buffalo are becoming extinct in front of his eyes, that the West was being tamed in ways he didn't like. I give him credit for taking his concerns for what was going on in the West and taking it and melding it with this general good government reform uh, that was going on in the East. And he founded the first Audubon Society that was very much part of that. And he had a lot of connections. So there was a lot of wealth involved that could start what were the very first conservation organization, the Boone and Crockett Club being one of them, and he started with Teddy Roosevelt. So Grinnell was sort of, you can say he was a dude, but on the other hand, he benefited from it because he could translate what was going on in one half of the country to the people who mattered in New York. And that's the way the environmental movement is shaped up today. It's mostly supported by urban people who occasionally visit places like Glacier National Park or Yellowstone, but their love and their sentiments are very strong, and they're the engine for the conservation movement in this country today. And Grinnell was really a prototype for that.
Well, and you mentioned, and we're gonna please get put questions in the chat, and I'm gonna hand it off to Amy in just a minute. John, I could talk to you all night. You mentioned Roosevelt and Boone and Crockett, and you write briefly in the book about. I sense that their first meeting wasn't necessarily the best meeting that was indicative of what would be a long lifetime partnership. Didn't Roosevelt write? Didn't Grinnell write something negative about Roosevelt's piece that Roosevelt had written? Do I have that right?
Right. Roosevelt, his wife and mother died on the same night, and he was just heartbroken, and he went out to his ranch in the Badlands of the Dakota Territory. And of course, he was a big hunter, and he came back and he wrote a book about his experiences, and it was published. And Grinnell reviewed it in Forest and Stream, of which he was the editor, and made some picky remarks ab- about Roosevelt's, how well did he know his subject? How well did he know the West? He there was Grinnell calling Roosevelt, who was way younger, a kind of a newbie. And so Roosevelt stormed into Grinnell's office at Forest and Stream. You can just imagine him with his eyes bulged out and bully Roosevelt, and wanted to shake his finger at him. And Roosevelt sits him down, and well, a fast friendship was formed. And ultimately, they got together and formed something called the Boone and Crockett Club, which was a gentleman's organization to promote, quote, fair chase in hunting. Let's bring good hunting ethics, good gentleman hunting ethics to that. And it was through Grinnell that it became not so much a hunting organization, but as a mouthpiece for conservation, for changing the laws of fair chase, of killing of migratory birds, this, that, and the other thing. I don't say this outright in my book, but on a reflection, I think you could, if you were careful, do a timeline and say, Theodore Roosevelt was a game hog. He liked to shoot stuff. Yeah, he learned taxidermy. He was a naturalist, and we know all the wonderful things he did. Thank God for Theodore Roosevelt. But until Theodore Roosevelt, the young man, met George Bird Grinnell, he didn't, there wasn't much evidence of his bent towards conservation. I think it was the elder Grinnell that really steered um, Roosevelt into becoming the conservationist he became. Maybe that was going to happen anyway, but it's one of the things I'd like to give Grinnell credit for.
Well, that's
I jump
very,
in? Can I jump
that's
in for a
very,
minute?
yeah.
I
Is that
do.
you?
Yeah. Uh, John, one of the things, where was my thought going? Well, first of all, he didn't found Forest and Stream. It was founded in 1873, and
Right.
he went in there after an Indian, the hunt with the Pawnee, and he walked down the street with an article that they published, and he got to know the staff, and they got to know him. And their editor, 2 or 3 years later, was a drunkard, and they asked Bird if he would become the editor of the whole shebang, and that's
Uh,
how he got in touch with, or got in control of it.
right. Yeah. He and his father bought it. Thank you for that, Hugh.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's a very powerful statement. The relationships. Our last book club of last year was John Clayton's book about Muir and Pinchot, and these
Great book.
relationships and how they play against each other, I think, are really very interesting, and that's a great insight. Amy Lucky, I know that there are a lot of questions in the chat, so I'm going to hand it off to you. In the meantime, Gracie's going to select a couple of winners for a winter cap and a Glacier Conservancy mug, and we'll get to that after Amy feeds in some questions from the crowd.
Let her
Okay,
rip.
here we go. Yeah, let her rip is right because not only do we have quite a few questions, but we have quite a few great questions and some a little bit long-winded. So I'm going to do my best. And folks who are watching, feel free to do just what Hugh did and jump in if you have follow-up for John or just want to ask your own question. And gold star goes to longtime book clubber Kathy Wyatt, who finished the book with 30 minutes to spare today, and she's on and she says she learned so much. So way to go, Kathy. Our first question is from Eric and Tanya, and they write, Grinnell had a great many accomplishments for conservation. What do you think he would have considered his most important?
That is a question I hadn't really considered. Um, I must say that the crown jewel of his accomplishments was really Glacier because that was his true love, and he came back there every year. But he had really he'd gone into Yellowstone in 1874, and it was the national park. It was our only national park, and the Organic Act said it would be a pleasuring ground for the public. And he realized, no, a national park could be something else. It could be a preserve for wildlife, and and he came up with also with the idea that the surrounding area could also be preserved, and that was the seed for the first national forest. So then when he finally got to Glacier, he called it my national park. So I have to say, out of his you know ego or possessiveness and his believing that it was virgin territory, as we know it wasn't, and the Blackfeet would be quick to concur with that. He saw that as tabula rasa, that he could put his mark on it. So I think that was it. Now, what will history regard? I would think that it is his creation of some of the early legislation is the foundation for the Endangered Species Act, which is much more resonant. But I would say Glacier was his big baby.
John, I agree with you. I also know, however, that he was so happy that his Audubon Society took off like it did. At the end of one year, they had 40,000 members, and he knew he was saving the birds. He was helping the birds. And he was a hunter, and he was doing some of the bad things as a youth that people were doing during that time, just inadvertently shooting at birds because it was a bird. But when he founded the Audubon Society, it's my feeling that wasn't his greatest achievement, but I think that was closest to his heart. That's an
Yeah.
opinion.
Well, the idea of founding an organization to protect an animal that all of a sudden gets 40,000 people. I mean, think of all the environmental organizations that came after that, the World Wildlife Fund, uh, et cetera, Ducks Unlimited. And again, Grinnell was there first, and it was really a prototype for so much that followed.
What else you got, Amy?
Well, our next one is one of our longer ones from Chuck, and I see that Chuck is showing on video. I was wondering, Chuck, if you wanted to unmute and ask your question. He's working on it. I can see him working on it. Bottom left, perhaps.
Got it. That's actually my wife, Victoria's question, so I'll defer to her.
Wonderful. Thank you, Victoria.
It always comes up in his name for some reason. So in the book, I noticed that Elizabeth often became ill during many of their Western excursions. And you wrote that she never complained when women were along. And you also said that she had never been keen on sitting around a campfire with men only. And I wanted to know, do you think George Grinnell ever realized and was sympathetic to how Elizabeth was feeling and that she wasn't happy only interacting with men during their trips?
Well, I'm fascinated by Elizabeth Grinnell, and she was a woman to be reckoned with. But yet, I'm not sure I ever really got to the bottom of their relationship. Um, she came west with him a number of times, and she was a good, solid hiker and all that. But I'm not sure how much she did love it. I they spent their honeymoon there at the foot of Chief Mountain. You've seen the photo of it. Anyway, let me ask you to restate your question once more, because I would love to talk about Elizabeth and her relationship to George, because it gets kind of lost in the shuffle. And I will just say that, the real purpose of anybody, the real holy grail of a biographer is to really get to what the self-knowledge is of your subject. What did Grinnell really know and think about himself? And I think knowing about his marriage is part of the key to it. And that was one of the toughest nuts to crack. Anyway, I kind of evaded your question sort of by forgetting what it was.
I guess I was really looking to, did you get a sense of him being sensitive to how his wife felt?
Um, yeah, I mean, it wasn't like, I mean, I can only uh, prognosticate, but when if she got ill and around camp or something like that, he didn't get angry with her. He just understood um, and was, I guess, not too put out by it. She she was always often by herself. There weren't a lot of women around, and these were hunting trips. These were guy trips. Um, we have no We have no, we never hear her voice. There's no letters. There's no paper trail on Elizabeth Grinnell. So I really don't know how she felt about it. And the best I can tell from her husband that he treated her with respect and thoughtfulness um, but part of it's just a cipher to me. I don't know. I don't know how to answer it better than that.
Well, thank you.
Okay, great. Elizabeth does seem like an interesting part of the story. Michelle wants to know, has there been any talk of making a movie?
Well, actually, there is. I was involved with a Montana PBS three-part series on Charlie Russell, which some of you may have seen. And Paul Zallis, who is the screenwriter and one of the guys behind that, um, has been working with Montana PBS on a Grinnell 1 hour documentary, and it was stalled for a while. And the last thing I heard is it's back on. We filmed a lot of interviews. We climbed up to Grinnell Glacier with a film crew. So I'm optimistic that there will be a Grinnell documentary um, not too long in the future.
Wow, great. That was not the answer that I expected. So I don't know if anybody else felt that way.
Well, I think sort
Um,
of a Henry Fonda, they need a tall, skinny guy to play him.
there you go.
Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart, right? Better.
So is his distant cousin.
Mm.
Yes, there we go. I'm
All
gonna
right.
hopefully let Brent unmute and ask his question. Brent, are you still on? I hope so.
I sure am, Amy. Can you just see me or hold on?
I can hear you.
There you go. Can you
We
see
can
me?
hear
I can hear you. I can't
There he
see
is.
you.
Hi, I'm coming in from Oregon, and I enjoyed your book when I read it.
I see you now, Brent. Yeah.
Okay.
I
Hi.
like that Metallica t-shirt.
Hey,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen them more than I've been to Grinnell, but I've been to Grinnell, or I mean, I've been to Glacier about 20 times. So I've been very privileged since 2012 to go there. And I found your book fantastic. And my question for you, of the many I do have, is there any more known about the relationship between G.R. Gold and George? It seemed like they almost had a yearning relationship. That's the energy I got from the book. And of course, that's in the eye of the beholder. But what, they hung out 2 times for a hunting excursion on the eastern side, and then I think visited Santa Barbara. But other than that, it seems like it's correspondence that waned, or ebb and flow, if you will. I wonder if
Well,
there's more to it.
I have no uh, lead pipe evidence, but I'm glad you asked that question. It does relate to the Elizabeth question because I have strong instincts that Grinnell was gay. Um, and he had this friend who'd gone to Yale also, who he had they would meet up at Glacier a few times, but not many times. They would write back and forth. And I think given the sort of the buttoned up late Victorian circumstances of the era, they were probably not consummated, but I think there was a first love there. And when I was going through the 40,000 pages of Grinnell's letters and also all of his handwritten diaries from all of his trips in the West, I um, I always had an ear cocked for how he wrote and talked about George Gould. And it's to me, it's kind of a tender, heartbreaking story. You know, at the end of Grinnell's life, the last year he went west, he and Elizabeth got on the train, left New York, didn't stop in any of the national parks, didn't stop in Glacier, and went directly to Santa Barbara. Now, that's where Gould had lived and had died. And Grinnell just went out there and walked through the neighborhood and walked the beach where George Gould, this old friend of his, has lived. And then he got on the train and went home. It's to me, it's a very touching story. So I've been called, I'm being sensational. I don't think this is anything that's anybody should be sweep under the carpet. It was hard to be gay in those times, but I think um, that's what I believe.
Thank you very much. Even though it was 50 years before his time, it's almost like a mountain man quality to the romance of being in the wilderness. Like just recently, after seeing it so many times, the Mountain Man movie and the relationship between Brian Keith's character and Charlton Heston. And there is a love there and admiration that's brotherly, but as you say, it seems like it's possibly a little bit stronger between those two men.
Well, let's not forget Brokeback Mountain.
Well, I was going to say that, but I didn't want to say anything inappropriate. Hey, I love the book clubs. Thank you very much, Doug and Amy.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Thanks for being here, Brent, and for your insight. Doug, I think even though I have lots more questions, I'm going to throw it back to you for maybe a giveaway or a speed round or just break things up a little bit.
Something fun. Yeah. So Gracie, do you have some winners for us?
I sure do. Our giveaway items tonight are a beanie and a mug, and I'm going to send the links in the chat as well because I just found out that they're also on sale right now, so that's always exciting. But our beanie winner tonight is Tristan Abbott, and then the mug winner is Susan Davidson. So Tristan and Susan, if you want to email us at info@glacier.org, I can help arrange for getting those shipped out to you. And then for everyone else, if you want a signed book plate, make sure to email info@glacier.org and we will get those as well, signed and sent out for you.
Yeah, thanks, John, for doing that. That's really a fun part of the program to be able to get a little book plate signed and put in your book at home, which we would have done obviously if we were all together.
It slows down the returns, I think, once you glue them in there.
that
doesn't increase their value, but it slows down the returns.
That's a fair point. Well, one of the questions that I had that I want to make sure that I ask is the kismet of your meeting with Matthew. Is it Spady? Is that how that's pronounced?
Yeah, Matthew Spady. Yeah, that's the fun about writing a book is who you meet along the way. Matthew Spady grew up in Virginia. He was going to be an opera singer, and he ended up being a technical publisher. And he ended up in the Upper West Side of New York in a very handsome, tall, old apartment building called the Grinnell Building. When he got there, he thought, well, why is it called the Grinnell? Well, the Grinnell apartment building is built on the site of the Grinnell family estate in what was called Audubon Park, called Audubon Park because Grinnell grew up next door to John James Audubon and his family. Um, and that was part of the inspiration for starting the first Audubon Society. Anyway, so Matthew Spady became a good friend, and he knew everything about the Grinnell's family's time in New York. I mean, I couldn't have written this book without him. And I mean, just granular knowledge about the deeds and the timing, and found a wonderful old newspaper articles about the family. And it's so much fun to work on a book because there are always people out there that are like-minded or want to give you a helping hand. And I haven't written a book yet where there hasn't been a Matthew Spady. But Matthew Spady's an
how did you meet
amazing
him?
guy. He wrote his own book about the Grinnells of Audubon Park. And if he's listening out there, I want to thank him again and again.
How did you meet him?
Gosh, you asked me that before we got together, and somebody else knew about him, and um, I'm sorry I can't remember, but as soon as I contacted him, it was like, wow,
Yeah,
um,
that's what
he
an
couldn't have been more
incredible
generous.
intersection of skill and luck, right? To find each other, and I think great books often have those intersections. When you were writing the book, he hadn't finished his yet. He has since finished his, and we're going to put in the chat a link to that book, which I
Great,
memory serves
great.
as The Neighborhood That Manhattan Forgot, or something like that.
Yeah, it's a good book, and if you care about Grinnell and if you care about good history, you should check it out.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. Amy, I think we can hand it back over to you, and then I'll close us up near the end.
Sounds good. So this question is started at the top and people have been commenting, so it keeps getting pushed down. So I wanted to make sure to get to this one. But 40,000 pages, John, what is your process for getting through that? And like, wait, how in the world?
It's a salt mine. So um, Grinnell's kept all of his he dictated his letters to a stenographer who typed them up on a primitive form of what would be a mimeograph machine. And so there was like a carbon copy of everything. And he bound them in letter books. Those letter books made their way to the Connecticut Audubon Society after his death. His wife, Elizabeth, gave them there. And then they were rescued from there and they went into the Sterling Library at Yale, Grinnell's alma mater, and there they were. And then the next technological wave was microfilm. So all of his letters were put on microfilm, 40 plus reels, 1,000 pages, 1,000 frames on a reel. And there they were in microfilm. And I thought, oh my God, how long is this going to take to bear, see it down in the basement in a creaky microfilm machine in some library. Well, I discovered that the University of Montana, the Mansfield Library, had a copy of these 40 plus reels of microfilm. So I went over there and said, well, better the basement of the Mansfield Library in Missoula than the basement of the Sterling Library in New Haven. And I went up to what's the copy shop there, and I said, well, I'm going to be printing out a lot of pages here, and I just want to let you know I'm about to be a fixture in this library for a long time. And this guy said, oh, we've just got a brand new machine. It just got here. And we can digitize 1,000 frame reel of microfilm in about 25 minutes. And I said, oh, yeah. He said, it'll cost you though. And I said, how much? He said, $30 a reel or something like that. Well, anyway, all of a sudden, I got all of the correspondence of George Bird Grinnell on a flash drive about as big as this finger that I could just take home and put into my laptop. And I sat down and for approximately 350 consecutive days. There were not many days off, and I went through them. transcribing the parts that I thought were uh, worthwhile and putting them in a notebook so then I could do word searches on them. And so finally, the exercise of just throwing 40,000 pages on my brain pan got me to interpolate and read into a little more. I mean, I'm looking for the man in there, and some of this is fairly formal correspondence, but some of it, Grinnell started to leak out towards me. Then all of his journals, which are these little letter notebooks about that big that he kept on all of his trips, starting back into the 1870s, all the way through to his last trip to Glacier, were all at the Southwest Museum, now part of the Autry Museum in Los Angeles. And I was able, with my little camera, to take a picture of every page of those notebooks. Um, so, can you all see me? I just lost you on my screen, but
We lost you.
we all there?
No.
We lost
We're
you.
all here. There
Oh,
we
you're
go.
back.
You're back.
Now I'm back. Miraculous. See, I'm not very good at technology after all.
Right.
Um, anyway, so the process of painstakingly going through things like that is turn over every stone. You're looking for little jewels, but you're also looking for the critical mass that gives you the fullest picture. And, so the little words that are favorite words that he used, and you realize, he would never say, I'm trying to keep the wolf from the door. He would say, I'm trying to keep the wolf from the piazza. Little things like that. Um, and he just sort of started to come out of the woodwork. He came out of the grain of this material for me. And I don't think I ever really got the whole beating heart of George Bird Grinnell in this book. But boy, I tried, and I can't imagine any other way to do it than the way I did it. It took me every minute of 5 years.
Wow. Well, there are lots of positive comments in the chat about your book, so I think you definitely got part of it.
Well, I think I'm preaching to the choir here.
So this is I love this question from Janet Brandt, who's a wonderful supporter of book club and the Conservancy. Um, but John, when you reflect on the era during Grinnell's life, do you wish you had lived during that time?
Well, of course, there's an old saying that things were great just before I got here. And Grinnell had the same impulse that we or any newcomer to Montana, the American West, has. Is that darn it, if I just gotten here a little earlier, that's Charlie Russell. Everything that Charlie Russell did in his life was about that. The West that was once, the West that was here. But Charlie Russell never saw a buffalo herd. Grinnell had that same urge, that same hankering for the time that had come before. So I'm happy, I'm happy to have been in Montana at all. I applaud Grinnell's idea that he thought that he got the last chance, I think is what he thought. And coming to Glacier was part of it. There was all the things that happened in Yellowstone. It was too late for that. The buffalo were gone. But finally he got off, it came down and James Willard Schultz took him into the walled-in lakes, and they climbed up there, and he thought, I'm not too late. I'm not too late. I've finally discovered something. Now, of course, that is naive and not necessarily respectful to the people whose homeland it already was. But I think that same impulse, that same desire is why everybody comes to Glacier and why everybody comes to the West.
Yeah, I think that's so true, John. And I think it's we hear it from our supporters that's one of the reasons that people sign up to help the groups like the Conservancy, because we're protecting the wilderness, wildlife, and wonder that helps keep Glacier the same way that George Bird Grinnell saw it back at the turn of the century. And we're really honored to do that. In fact, today we were had a meeting where we are going to be able to give the park this year $4.8 million because of donor support. All of your support. It's really amazing. And of course, at the beginning of the year, we start over. We fund wilderness specifically. We fund 11 wilderness rangers in the park, and we can't do it without private support. So if that moves you, we're going to throw a little link in the chat that you can give some money to our wilderness efforts. And we are only a vehicle between the park and this great community of caring. So thank you all for doing that, and thank you, Amy, for letting me interrupt you for a moment.
And Grinnell's as valid as ever because, yeah, he stuck names on a lot of the glaciers, including Grinnell Glacier. And boy, talk about the canary in the coal mine. The story of the glaciers that he began, and as that story continues today, is now more vital than ever. And as I say, the national parks are their own propaganda. Anybody that goes there, anybody who goes to Grinnell Glacier or even gets close to it, learns something very graphically that is really important.
John, pardon me, just one little thing. He did not name his own glacier. It was named by a lieutenant in the Army who befriended him and was with him, and he happened to be involved with it was early national park. It wasn't a national park organization yet, but he did not name his own glacier. It was named for him.
Beacom. The guy's name was Beacom.
John Beacom. Yep, that's it. Thank you.
Well, speaking of glaciers,
good.
And Grinnell Glacier, Ron has a little bit of a technical question. He writes, perhaps I've misread your description of Grinnell's first ascent of his glacier. If I'm reading your description on page 171, he ascended in October of 1888. All other sources I've seen, including the NPS, state it was November of 1887. Did you find that discrepancy, John?
My bad. You got it right. Yeah. If there were ever a second edition, we would nail that. But I think the chronology in the TikTok of the book is the chronology is right. But is it the photo caption or something like that? But yeah, you got me.
Doug, did we want to do a quick speed round? I know it's a favorite of book clubbers.
Yeah, it's always a crowd favorite, and we like making our authors nervous. Although then when they hear the questions, they become much less nervous. Okay, so I have 5 questions, real fast here, John. You ready? Okay, the first question is Livingston Eateries. You have a choice: Second Street Bistro or the Mint.
Lately, it's been the Mint. Taco Tuesdays at the Mint.
Okay, good. That's a good call. John spends his time in Prairie, Montana, and if you don't know where that is, Chico Hot Springs is the answer. Okay, second question. You need a guide. Which brother do you choose, Lute or Frank North?
Lute. Better campsite companion.
Okay, so you're going to hang one photograph in your house. You're going to have L.A. Huffman or Edward Curtis.
Are you talking about the value?
Up to you.
Curtis.
Curtis. Okay. I see Larry Len Peterson's got a new book on Curtis. I'm excited to see that.
With a foreword by moi.
Oh, really? Okay. And I love Larry Len. We'll talk offline about that. Okay. And these are two very technical questions. Yes or no, is a hot dog a sandwich?
No.
No. And Seahawks or Patriots? It's the Super Bowl.
Not nice. Not nice.
Go Pats.
Okay. Well, I'll give you the pass is IPA or PBR?
IPA.
Okay, very good. Amy, that's my speed round for tonight. Do you have one more short question for us?
I do. I did not name this person, but somebody on Zoom is Old Goat 99. Um, and Old Goat 99 writes on page 56 has a half-page description of a Grinnell photo taken in San Francisco. Why isn't the photo reproduced in the book? It didn't make the cut.
Tell me what's the photo?
Half-page description of a Grinnell photo taken in San Francisco on page 56
Of my book.
of your book. Maybe, or Old Goat 99 has more to add.
Um,
I thought
I'm here.
oh, I see
I'm
what you
here.
mean. Yeah, it is in the book. It's in the frontispiece of the book. It's the very first photo if you look on the title page, that's the photo.
Aha.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
I found that it was not identified in a box of miscellaneous stuff at the library at Yale. It was sitting there in an envelope at the very back, not identified, and I pulled it out, and I don't think it's ever been seen except in my book.
That's
Great.
amazing.
Glad
I've
we
read
ended with that question.
everything of the book, but I didn't read the frontispiece.
Well, there it is. It's an amazing photo. It really is.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And it's an amazing book and an incredible start to 2026 for the Glacier Book Club. Thank you so much, John, for being with us tonight. Thank you, this incredible, as I said, community of caring who comes together. It means so much to me that you've been part of this journey with me. And we've got another great book, John Fraley, who you've heard from before, local author. He'll be our next Glacier Book Club. And in between, two local, really accomplished filmmakers and photographers, the Leffler brothers, are going to come and do a Glacier conversation talking about their upcoming movie about the Going to the Sun Road.
Wow.
And so that's going to be super fun. We
I'm
skip
in.
between, yeah, that's going to be really great. And actually, we're hosting the world premiere of their movie on June 23rd at the Wachholz Center. Tickets actually went on sale today at 10:30 this morning. So, John, I hope you'll come and visit us in Glacier. You're now a part of the Glacier family. And thank you very much again for your amazing book, for your scholarship and your friendship. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the trail here soon. Everybody, thanks for another great evening. And I wish you a great evening and more snow. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks, John.